This story is titled, My Kid Said I'm Not Her Real Father, Just a Man Who Sponsors Her Luxury Lifestyle. So I silently left without arguing, but immediately canceled her university payments, sold all her expensive items and jewelry. Her mother tried to defend her, but it was too late. Hey everyone, my name is Tyler, and I'm 42 years old. After raising my stepdaughter for 8 years and giving her everything she could possibly want, she finally snapped at me with words that cut deeper than I ever expected. You're not my father. Stop acting like you are. When her mother tried to defend her at first, I didn't say a word. I just listened, processed what had been said, and then did exactly what she asked for. I stopped pretending to be her father. That decision included selling the car I had bought her, liquidating the college fund I had been building for years, and completely cutting off the funding for her lifestyle. What happened next taught all of us a harsh but necessary lesson about respect, responsibility, and what it really means to be a family. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a 42-year-old man, and I've been married to Victoria, who's 39, for 8 years now. When we got together, she came with what some people might call baggage. Specifically, a daughter named Lily, who's now 16 years old. Lily's biological father is the classic definition of a deadbeat dad. He decided that fatherhood wasn't for him when Lily was around 3 years old, and he just completely ghosted from their lives. No child support payments, no weekend visits, no phone calls, absolutely nothing at all. He might as well have been abducted by aliens for all the presents he had in that kid's life. When I first met Victoria, Lily was 7 years old. She was this shy little girl with these huge brown eyes who would always hide behind her mom's legs whenever strangers were around. Victoria was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and put food on the table. They were living in this cramped apartment that smelled like cigarettes from the previous tenant, and it was clear that they were just barely scraping by. At the time, I was making decent money as a construction project manager. Business was booming with all the new developments going up around town, and I had my own place. I figured I could help out with their situation. Looking back now, maybe that was my first mistake, thinking I could just swoop in and fix everything like some discount version of Superman. The truth is, I'd always wanted kids of my own, but I found out in my late 20s that wasn't going to happen naturally. The doctor told me that my swimmers were basically dead in the water, so that dream seemed impossible. When I met Victoria and Lily, it felt like fate was giving me a second chance at having the family I'd always wanted. At first, everything was absolutely great. Lily warmed up to me pretty quickly and started calling me Uncle Tyler instead of hiding whenever I came around. We'd spend weekends watching Disney movies together. I'd help her with her homework when she got stuck, and I'd take her to soccer practice when Victoria was stuck at work. It was all the normal stepdad stuff that felt natural and right. The wedding happened about a year later. It was a small ceremony with just family and close friends, nothing fancy. Lily was our flower girl, grinning from ear to ear in this frilly pink dress that probably cost more than Victoria's monthly grocery budget. I remember standing at the altar thinking that this was it. We were officially a family now, the 3 of us against the world, ready to build something beautiful together. After we got married, I started taking on more financial responsibility for our little family. It made complete sense to me. I was the primary breadwinner, and I wanted to give them the stability they'd never had before. Victoria was finally able to quit her second job and focus on being a mom, which was something she'd never been able to do as a single parent struggling to make ends meet. We moved into a better house in a decent school district, something I'd been planning since before the wedding. It had a yard where Lily could play, and she got her own room for the first time in her life. The walk-in closet in that room sent her absolutely over the moon with excitement. I'll never forget watching her spin around in that empty closet, arms spread wide, talking about all the clothes she was going to hang up in there. The next major decision was about Lily's education. The private school came as a natural progression because Lily was smart as hell, but the public schools in our area were complete garbage. I found this prep school about 15 minutes away from our house that had an excellent reputation. The tuition was absolutely brutal. We're talking $21,000 a year, but I figured it was an investment in her future. When I told Victoria that we could afford to send Lily there, she actually cried. These were happy tears, mind you. Tears of relief that her daughter would get opportunities she'd never been able to provide on her own. Then came the braces situation. Poor kid had teeth that looked like they'd been installed by someone who'd never actually seen a mouth before. We're talking about a serious orthodontic situation that was going to require professional intervention. 3 years of orthodontist visits and $7,000 down the drain later, Lily had this absolutely perfect smile that could have been featured in a toothpaste commercial. The transformation was incredible, and seeing her confidence grow as her teeth straightened out made every penny worth it. When Lily turned 15, I decided it was time to get her a car. I bought her a 2020 Honda Accord, not brand new, but it had low mileage and was incredibly reliable and safe. It was silver metallic with all the modern safety features because I'm not an idiot when it comes to teenage girls and cars. That combination is basically a recipe for insurance nightmares, so I made sure we had the safest vehicle possible. I spent $24,000 on that car and put it in my name for insurance purposes, which made the monthly payments more manageable. Victoria kept telling me that I was spoiling Lily, but she said it in a good way. "She's so lucky to have you," she'd say with this smile that made everything worth it. "You're the dad she never had." Those words meant everything to me because that's exactly what I was trying to be. The father figure that had been missing from her life for so long. But my real pride and joy was the college fund I'd started. I began contributing to it the month after we got married, throwing $700 from every single paycheck into a carefully managed mutual fund. For 7 solid years, I never missed a contribution, watching that account grow steadily. By this point, it was sitting at around $105,000. The plan was beautifully simple in my mind. I wanted to give Lily the college experience I never had. I wanted her to graduate completely debt-free and start her adult life without that financial anchor around her neck. I thought I was building something solid and permanent. A family, a foundation, a legacy that would last. I was creating stability and opportunities that Lily had never had before, and I was proud of every sacrifice I made to make it happen. Looking back now, I realized I was actually building a very expensive house of cards that was destined to come crashing down. The attitude started creeping in around Lily's freshman year of high school. Nothing dramatic at first, just little things that made me raise an eyebrow and wonder if I was seeing things that weren't really there. Lily would roll her eyes when I'd remind her about homework, like I was personally insulting her intelligence by suggesting she might need to actually do her assignments. She'd conveniently forget to do her chores unless Victoria specifically asked her to do them, even though I'd been asking her to do the same tasks for weeks. But teenagers are moody, right? That's what everyone told me anyway. "Just wait until she's 15, my coworkers would joke between job sites. That's when the real fun starts. They weren't wrong about that prediction, unfortunately. Sophomore year was when Lily discovered that she was attractive, and I'm not trying to be creepy here. I'm just stating the obvious facts. The kid had hit the genetic lottery in a big way. She was tall and athletic from years of playing soccer, and she had that perfect smile courtesy of my bank account's $7,000 investment in orthodontics. Suddenly, she had boys calling the house constantly, asking her to homecoming and various other school events. The whole 9 yards of teenage social drama was now playing out in our living room. That's also when the entitlement really kicked into high gear in a way that I couldn't ignore anymore. She'd talk to her friends about her car, like she'd saved up for it herself over years of hard work. I heard her on the phone once describing it as my Honda to some boy who was obviously trying to impress her. When he asked how she'd managed to afford such a nice car at her age, she just laughed and said something vague about working hard. Working hard at what, exactly? Getting driven to school in the car that I'd bought, insured, and maintained while she contributed absolutely nothing? The grades started slipping around the same time, which was probably not a coincidence. Lily had always been a solid A- student throughout middle school and her early high school years. She was consistently on the honor roll, and her teachers always had good things to say about her work ethic and participation. But suddenly, homework was becoming optional in her mind. Missing assignments started showing up on the parent portal with alarming frequency. When I'd bring up these concerning grade trends, she'd get immediately defensive and dismissive. "God, Tyler, it's just one assignment. Stop being so paranoid about everything," she'd say, with this tone that made it clear she thought I was overreacting. Not dad, not even stepdad, just Tyler, like I was some random guy who happened to live in the same house and had no business commenting on her academic performance. Victoria would always take Lily's side in these conversations, which frustrated me to no end. "She's under a lot of pressure," Victoria would say, making excuses for behavior that I thought was unacceptable. "College applications are stressful. Cut her some slack." But here's the thing that really got under my skin. Lily was talking about college like it was a guaranteed done deal, not something she needed to work for. It wasn't if I get into state university, but when I go to state university. It wasn't if we can afford it, but I'm thinking about rushing a sorority my freshman year. Just pure assumption that the money would always be there because it always had been. She was planning her entire future around my wallet without ever acknowledging where the funding was actually coming from. Lily started getting mouthy with Victoria too, but it was completely different from how she treated me. With her mom, it was typical mother-daughter drama. The classic eye-rolling, door slamming. You don't understand me tantrums that probably every teenage girl puts her mother through at some point. But with me, the disrespect was dismissive and condescending, like I was the hired help who'd forgotten his place in the household hierarchy. When I'd suggest family movie night, I'd get, "That's okay, I have plans," delivered with this tone that made it clear my input wasn't wanted or needed. When I'd offer to help with college essay preparation, I'd get, "I've got it handled," with the same dismissive attitude. Everything was delivered with this particular tone that made it crystal clear my involvement wasn't welcome in any aspect of her life. Victoria noticed the change in Lily's behavior, but she always had ready-made excuses for everything. "She's becoming independent, and that's what we want, right?" she'd say when I'd bring up my concerns. "She's growing up." Yeah, she was growing up all right. Growing up into someone I didn't recognize and frankly didn't like very much. The worst part was watching Lily's relationship with money become increasingly unhealthy. She'd blow through her monthly allowance in the first week, like it was burning a hole in her pocket, then come asking for more, like it was my job to fund her lifestyle indefinitely. We're talking about Starbucks every single morning before school at $7 a pop, new clothes every other weekend, because her current wardrobe was literally ancient, concert tickets, expensive makeup, gas money for the car I'd bought her. The list was endless. When I'd suggest that maybe she should get a part-time job to learn some financial responsibility, both Victoria and Lily would look at me like I'd suggested she start selling organs on the black market. "She needs to focus on school," Victoria would say, jumping to Lily's defense immediately. "There's plenty of time for work after college." Right. Focus on the school she was increasingly blowing off to hang out with friends who also had everything handed to them on silver platters. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house, which was a deeply unsettling experience. Lily would breeze in from whatever activity she'd been doing, grab food from the fridge I'd stocked and paid for, head up to her room in the house I was paying the mortgage on, and not say a single word to me. If I tried to start any kind of conversation with her, I'd get one-word answers and dead silence until she could escape back to her room. But the car, the phone, the college fund, and all the other financial support, those were just expected background noise in the symphony of her life. She never questioned where any of it came from or what it cost me to provide it all. I kept telling myself it was just a phase that every parent goes through with their teenagers. She'd grow out of it eventually, right? One day, she'd realize how much I'd done for her and be grateful for all the sacrifices I'd made. That was my second major mistake, thinking that gratitude would come naturally without any effort on my part to teach it. Junior year was when everything really went completely off the rails in ways I never could have anticipated. Junior year was when everything really went completely off the rails in ways I never could have anticipated. Lily's grades didn't just slip. They fell off a cliff entirely. We're talking about C's and D's in classes she used to ace without breaking a sweat. The private school started sending emails about concerning patterns and lack of engagement, which was their polite way of saying my $21,000 a year investment was going down the drain. But while her academic life was crumbling, Lily's social life was absolutely thriving. Every single weekend was some party, sleepover, or study group that definitely didn't involve any actual studying. She'd roll in on Sunday morning, looking like she'd been through a blender, sleep until 3 in the afternoon, then spend the rest of the day glued to her phone, completely unproductive. When I'd try to address any of this concerning behavior, Victoria would immediately run interference for her daughter. "She's been working so hard all semester," she'd say, making excuses that made no sense given the evidence. She deserves to have some fun. Working hard at what exactly? Perfecting her eye roll technique? Mastering the art of selective hearing? The disrespect was getting progressively worse with each passing week. Lily would walk into the kitchen while I was cooking dinner and immediately start complaining about the smell, like my presence in my own kitchen was personally offensive to her. She'd leave her dirty dishes in the sink for days at a time, then act personally offended when I'd ask her to clean them up. "I was going to do it later," became her standard catchphrase for everything. Later never came, of course. She started bringing friends over without asking permission, treating our house like her personal hangout spot. These kids would raid the pantry like locusts, leave messes everywhere, and not even acknowledge that I existed. I was just the ghost who mysteriously restocked the snacks and paid for their entertainment. One particularly memorable incident happened when I came home from work to find 7 teenagers in my living room, eating pizza they'd ordered using my DoorDash account. Lily didn't even look up from her phone when I walked in, just kept scrolling through whatever social media app was consuming her attention like nothing unusual was happening. "Did you ask permission to order food?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "I texted Mom," she said, still not bothering to look at me or pause her scrolling. "I'm asking if you asked me." The look she gave me when she finally lifted her eyes from her phone could have melted steel. It was pure contempt mixed with confusion, like she couldn't understand why I thought I had any authority in this situation. "Why would I need to ask you?" she said. That question hit differently than anything she'd said before, because she was absolutely right from her perspective. In her mind, why would she need to ask me anything? I was just the guy who paid for things and had no real authority or respect in this household. Victoria tried to smooth things over later that evening, as she always did. "She's just comfortable with you, and that's good, right?" she said. "It means she sees you as family." But it didn't feel like family at all. It felt like I was being taken for granted by people who saw me as a utility, rather than a person deserving of basic respect. The real kicker in all of this was the car situation that had been building up for months. Lily had been driving that Honda Accord for over a year at this point, and I'd been covering absolutely everything: insurance, gas, maintenance, repairs, everything. The kid was putting 250 miles a week on that vehicle, just driving around with friends and burning through my money like it was an endless resource. When I suggested that maybe she should contribute to gas costs, since she was the one using the car constantly, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. "That's not fair!" she screamed at me like I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. "It's my car! I need it for school!" My car. She called it my car. The car that I had bought with my money, that I was insuring with my money, and that I was maintaining with my money, while she contributed exactly nothing to any aspect of car ownership. Victoria immediately backed her up, as she always did. "She's still in school, Tyler," she said. "She'll have plenty of time to worry about money when she's older." Right, when she's older, and my bank account is completely empty from funding her adolescence. I started to feel like I was losing my mind completely. Was I being unreasonable here? Was this just normal teenage behavior and I was being a hard ass about it? But then, I'd look at the actual numbers, and reality would hit me like a truck. $21,000 a year for private school. The $450 monthly car payment that was finally finished. But now, I was covering all the operating costs. The $700 from every single paycheck going into her college fund. The endless stream of "I need money for this" and "I need money for that" requests. I was financially supporting 2 people while being treated like the hired help by both of them. The pressure was building like a boiler that was about to explode, and every eye roll, every dismissive comment, every assumption that my money was automatically their money was adding another pound of pressure to the system. Something was going to give, and I just didn't know it would be me who finally snapped. The explosion came on a completely random Wednesday in April. Lily's midterm grades had come in through the parent portal, and they were worse than they'd ever been in her entire academic career. We're talking about 3 Fs, 2 Ds, and 1 C- in a class I was pretty sure she was cheating in based on the sudden improvement from her usual performance. I found her in the living room with her feet up on the coffee table I'd bought, watching Netflix on the TV I'd paid for, acting like she didn't have a care in the world. "Lily, we need to talk about your grades," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. She didn't even bother to pause the show she was watching. "What about them?" she said with complete indifference. "You're failing 3 classes. This isn't sustainable if you want to graduate and go to college." "I'll bring them up," she said dismissively, like this was just a minor inconvenience. "How? You've been saying that for months now, and things keep getting worse." Finally, I got her attention, and the look she gave me was pure annoyance, like I was a telemarketer who'd called during dinner. "Look, Tyler, I've got it handled," she said. "You don't need to worry about it." "I absolutely do need to worry about it," I said, feeling my frustration rising. "Your college acceptances are conditional on maintaining decent grades. If you fail these classes, then I'll take summer school," she interrupted. Problem solved. The casual dismissal hit me completely wrong. She was talking about potentially destroying her future like she was discussing what to have for lunch, with zero awareness of the consequences or the cost. "Summer school costs money, Lily," I said, trying to get through to her. Money that could be going toward your college fund instead of fixing problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. That's when she finally turned around from the TV, and the expression on her face was something I'd never seen before. It was pure entitlement mixed with irritation that I was even questioning her logic. "Oh, please, like you won't pay for it anyway," she said, with this staggering confidence that took my breath away. "You always do." The certainty in her voice was absolutely mind-blowing. She wasn't hoping I'd pay for summer school. She was stating it as an undeniable fact, like gravity or the sunrise. "What if I don't?" I asked. "What if I decide I'm not paying for summer school because you chose to blow off your regular classes?" She actually laughed at me. Not a nervous laugh or an uncomfortable giggle, but a genuine laugh like I just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Right, okay, good one," she said, turning back to her show like the conversation was over and I'd been dismissed by my teenage daughter in my own house. That's when something inside me snapped. Not screaming, not yelling, but something fundamental broke in that moment. "Turn off the TV," I said in a voice I didn't recognize. "We're having this conversation right now." "God, why are you being so dramatic? It's just grades," she said. But there was a slight edge to her voice now, like she was starting to realize this wasn't going according to her usual script. "Because I'm your father and—" "No, you're not." The words hit the room like a bomb going off. Dead silence except for whatever garbage she was watching on Netflix. The air itself seemed to change, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space. "What did you say?" I asked, even though I'd heard her perfectly clearly. She turned around again, and this time there was no mistaking the message in her eyes or her voice. This wasn't said in anger or frustration. It was said with cold, calculated certainty. "You're not my father. Stop acting like you are." Victoria walked into the living room right during this exchange, took one look at both of us, and immediately went into damage control mode like she always did when things got uncomfortable. "Lily, apologize to Tyler right now," she said, but her voice lacked any real authority. "For what? Telling the truth?" Lily shot back. Victoria tried to play both sides, as she always did when there was conflict in the house. "Lily, go to your room. Tyler, let's talk about this privately." But Lily wasn't done delivering her message. She stood up from the couch, looked me straight in the eye, and delivered what she clearly thought was the knockout punch that would end this conversation permanently. "You want to know the truth?" she said. "You're not my dad. You're just the guy who pays for stuff. That's it. That's your whole role in this family." Then she walked upstairs like nothing significant had happened, leaving me standing there with my wife, processing the fact that 8 years of my life, 8 years of trying to be the father figure she'd never had just been reduced to a simple financial transaction. Victoria immediately tried to smooth things over, as she always did when Lily crossed a line. "She didn't mean it," she said quickly. "She's just upset about the grades. You know how teenagers get when they're stressed." But I knew with absolute certainty that she did mean it. Every single word. Because it was the truth, and we all knew it. I wasn't her father in her mind. I was her ATM. The guy who funded her lifestyle, and then was expected to shut up about it when she made poor choices. The walking credit card, who was supposed to pay for everything and have no opinions about how his money was being spent or wasted. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, everything was crystal clear. Lily had just defined our relationship with brutal honesty that cut through all the pretense and wishful thinking I'd been clinging to. I wasn't her father. I was her ATM. The guy who funded her lifestyle and then was expected to remain silent when she made terrible decisions. The walking credit card who was supposed to pay for everything and have no opinions about how his money was being spent or completely wasted. "Fine," message received loud and clear. If that's all I was to her, then maybe it was time to start acting like it. If I was just the funding source with no parental authority, then perhaps this funding source needed to make some executive decisions about what he was willing to pay for going forward. I woke up Friday morning with the kind of clarity that comes from finally accepting an uncomfortable truth that you've been avoiding for months. Lily wanted me to be just the guy who pays for stuff? Well, this guy was about to make some serious changes about what he was willing to pay for. But first, I needed to have a crucial conversation with my wife about the future of our marriage and our family. I found Victoria in the kitchen that evening, doing her usual thing of pretending nothing significant had happened and hoping the whole situation would just blow over if we ignored it long enough. "We need to talk," I said, and my tone made it clear this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "About what Lily said?" she asked, though I could tell she was hoping I'd say no. "No, Victoria, we need to talk about you. About us. about what kind of family we're actually running here and whether I want to be part of it anymore. She put down her coffee mug with a look that told me she knew this wasn't going to be a quick, easy conversation that ended with everything going back to normal. I've been thinking about what Lily said, I continued, and she's not wrong. I am just the guy who pays for stuff. But what bothers me more than her saying it is that you're completely okay with that dynamic. That's not fair, she started to protest. Let me finish, I said firmly. For 8 years, I've been treated like a walking credit card by your daughter. And every single time I try to address her behavior, you make excuses for her. Every time I try to parent her or set boundaries, you undermine me. Every time she disrespects me or dismisses me, you tell me to let it slide because she's just a kid or she's going through a tough time. Victoria was getting defensive, which was exactly what I expected. She does respect you, she said. She's just going through a difficult period with college applications and… Stop, I said, cutting her off. Just stop making excuses for once. She told me exactly what she thinks of me, and you stood there trying to smooth it over instead of addressing the fundamental problem in our household. I took a deep breath because what I was about to say would change everything between us, one way or another. So here's what's going to happen, Victoria. You have a choice to make right now. Either you start backing me up as Lily's father, help me teach her some basic respect and responsibility, and we fix this family together as a team, or I'm done with all of it. The color drained from her face completely. What do you mean done? She asked, though I think she already knew the answer. I mean, I'll file for divorce, I said clearly. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being treated like hired help by people who are supposed to love me. Tyler, you can't be serious, Victoria said, her voice shaking slightly. Over a teenager having an attitude? It's not about her attitude, Victoria, I replied firmly. It's about respect. It's about being a team instead of you and her constantly ganging up against me. It's about raising a kid who understands that actions have consequences and that the world doesn't revolve around her wants and needs. I could see the wheels turning in her head, and I'm sure she was calculating what a divorce would mean financially. Single mom again, back to the 2-job lifestyle, cramped apartment living, no more private school for Lily. The comfortable life I'd provided would disappear overnight. What exactly are you asking me to do? She asked carefully. I'm asking you to be my wife instead of just Lily's mom, I said. When I discipline her, you back me up instead of undermining me. When she disrespects me, you address it immediately instead of making excuses. When I make decisions about how my money gets spent, you support those decisions instead of taking her side every single time. Victoria was quiet for a long time, clearly wrestling with the gravity of what I was saying and what it would mean for all of us. Finally, she said, "And if I do this? If I agree to what you're asking? If you do this and actually mean it," I said, "then we can rebuild this family the right way. But I'm completely done being the ATM with no voice." Lily made it crystal clear that's all I am to her, so maybe it's time she learns what life looks like without that ATM. She agreed. Whether it was out of genuine love for me and our marriage or financial panic about what divorce would mean, I honestly didn't care at that point. The important thing was that she agreed to start functioning as my partner instead of just Lily's defender. The next morning, I made some phone calls that would change everything. First call was to my financial advisor, a conversation I'd never imagined having. "I need to liquidate the education savings account," I told him. "All of it." "Tyler, is everything all right?" he asked with obvious concern. "That's Lily's college money we're talking about." "I want it liquidated completely," I repeated. "Transfer everything to my checking account." It took 4 business days for everything to clear completely. The final total was $108,600. 8 years of $700 monthly contributions, plus market growth that had been steadily building her future. The next call was to the mortgage company to request a payoff statement. I owed $82,400 on the house that had been our family home. The car was next on my list. I checked the title to confirm what I already knew. My name only, since I'd bought and financed everything myself. I looked up the current market value online and listed it for $20,000 on every platform I could find. AutoTrader, Cars.com, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, everywhere. Saturday morning, the first serious buyer came to look at the Honda. Lily saw them from her bedroom window and came downstairs with this completely confused expression on her face. "Tyler, who are those people?" she asked. "Potential buyers," I replied calmly. "Buyers for what?" "The Honda, I'm selling it." That's when the meltdown started, but this time something was different. Victoria didn't immediately jump to Lily's defense like she always had before. She looked at me, then looked at Lily, and I could see her making a conscious choice about which side she was going to take this time. "Why are you selling it, Tyler?" Victoria asked, her voice careful and measured. "Because Lily made it crystal clear that I'm not her father," I said evenly. "So I'm not going to keep funding her lifestyle like one." Lily looked between us with growing panic in her eyes. "Mom, tell him he can't sell my car!" Victoria took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she didn't automatically take Lily's side. "It's not your car, Lily," she said firmly. "It's Tyler's car that he bought for you to use." The look of complete betrayal on Lily's face was something to see. For the first time in years, her mom wasn't automatically jumping to her defense and making excuses for her behavior. This united front was something she'd never experienced before, and it was clearly terrifying for her. The buyer made an offer of $19,500, which I accepted on the spot. Cash deal, paperwork signed, car gone that afternoon. When Lily found out about the college fund being liquidated, she completely lost it. We're talking about a full nuclear meltdown, screaming and crying like I'd personally destroyed her entire future. "That was my college fund!" she screamed. "You can't do this to me!" This time, Victoria stepped up in a way that shocked both Lily and me. "Lily, that was Tyler's money," she said firmly. "Money that he was saving for your education out of the goodness of his heart. And after the way you've been treating him, I don't blame him one bit for changing his mind." Lily looked at her mom like she'd grown a second head. The united front was something she'd never seen before, and it was clearly more terrifying than losing the money itself. But I wasn't done with the changes. Over the next few weeks, I systematically cut off every single one of Lily's funding streams. No more eating out money for her daily restaurant visits with friends. No more new clothes budget for her weekend shopping sprees. No more daily Starbucks runs funded by my credit card. Those $7 coffee drinks were now coming out of her own pocket. When she complained about any of these changes, Victoria actually backed me up instead of making excuses. "You want to be treated like an adult, Lily?" she'd say. "Adults pay for their own stuff." The phone was next on my list. I switched her from the unlimited data plan to a basic plan that only included calls and texts. When she freaked out about not being able to scroll through Instagram and TikTok all day long, Victoria told her she could get a job and pay for her own plan if the basic one wasn't good enough for her needs. Private school tuition was the big one that really drove the point home. Lily had 1 semester left of her senior year, and I'd already paid for it, so she could finish. But I made it crystal clear that if she wanted to walk across that stage at graduation, she needed to bring her grades up to at least a C average. No more skating by on my financial support while failing her classes and disrespecting the opportunities I'd provided. The transformation was incredible to watch, though it didn't happen overnight. Without her car, Lily was stuck asking for rides everywhere, which meant she actually had to interact with us and explain where she was going. Without unlimited funds, she had to actually think about what she spent money on, instead of just buying whatever caught her eye. Without the safety net of knowing I'd always bail her out, she had to start taking responsibility for her choices and their consequences. At first, Lily kept waiting for me to cave and go back to the old way of doing things. Every few days, she'd test the boundaries by asking for money for something she claimed was absolutely essential. She'd act shocked and personally offended when I said no, like I was being unreasonable for not funding her lifestyle anymore. She'd look to Victoria for backup, expecting her mom to override my decisions like she always had before. But Victoria was sticking to our agreement and supporting my choices instead of undermining them. The job search started out of pure necessity rather than any desire to learn responsibility. Lily applied to every retail store in the mall, most restaurants in the area, and several other entry-level positions. She got rejected from most of them, and I suspect it was because she had absolutely zero work experience, and her application answers probably came across as entitled as hell. She finally got hired at some trendy clothing store for $12 an hour. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest employment that would teach her what money actually meant in the real world. Her first paycheck was a massive reality check. After taxes, $12 an hour doesn't go very far when you're used to unlimited funding from someone else's bank account. She started understanding why I'd get annoyed when she'd blow $60 on lunch with friends without thinking about it. Because now she realized that $60 represented 5 hours of actual work on her feet dealing with demanding customers. But here's the thing that surprised me. Lily was actually pretty good at the job once she figured out that showing up on time and doing what you're asked isn't optional. She learned how to deal with difficult customers, how to work as part of a team, and how to take direction from supervisors. Skills that no amount of money could have taught her. Her grades started improving too. probably because she didn't have the energy to stay out partying all night when she had to be at work the next morning. When you're exhausted from a real job, homework starts looking like a reasonable way to spend your evening instead of just another burden to avoid. Victoria and I were rebuilding our relationship too, and it was amazing how much easier marriage became when we were actually functioning as a team. Turns out when you're not constantly fighting about parenting decisions because one person keeps undermining the other, you remember why you fell in love in the first place. We started having conversations about Lily's behavior instead of arguments about my supposedly unfair expectations. We began doing date nights again and having actual conversations instead of just coordinating Lily's schedule and activities. But Lily still hadn't apologized for what she'd said or acknowledged what she'd done wrong. She was adapting to the new reality and learning to function within the boundaries I'd set. But there was no recognition that her actions had consequences or that she'd hurt me deeply. She was just going through the motions, waiting for things to go back to normal and for me to start funding her lifestyle again. That reckoning was still coming, and when it finally arrived, it would be more meaningful than I ever expected. 4 months into this new regime, Lily was starting to crack in ways that showed the entitlement was slowly bleeding out of her system. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, but you could see the gradual changes in how she approached everything. She'd come home from work absolutely exhausted, count her tips from the register, and realize she'd made $35 for a 7-hour shift. Then, she'd look at some outfit online that cost $90 and actually have to think about whether it was worth almost 3 full shifts of work. The social dynamics with her friends were changing too, which was probably the hardest part for her to navigate. Lily's friends were all still living off their parents' money, going out to expensive restaurants and shopping sprees that she simply couldn't afford anymore. She started declining invitations not because she didn't want to go, but because she literally couldn't afford to keep up with their lifestyle. I watched her FaceTime with her friend Jessica one night, and the conversation really showed me how much things had changed. They were talking about some concert they all wanted to go to, and the tickets were $130 each. Money that Lily used to spend without even thinking about it. "I can't do it," Lily said, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "I'm saving for a car." "Just ask your dad for the money," Jessica suggested casually. "He always pays for everything anyway." The look on Lily's face was pure frustration mixed with something I'd never seen before. Embarrassment. "It's not that simple anymore," she said quietly. That was the first real crack in the armor. The first admission that things had fundamentally changed, and that she couldn't just assume my money would always be available for whatever she wanted. It was a small moment, but it meant everything to me, because it showed she was finally starting to understand consequences. Her grades kept improving steadily over the next few months. Not dramatically, but consistently, which was actually more impressive than a sudden turnaround would have been. Turns out when you don't have a car to cruise around in after school, and you can't afford to hang out at the mall every day, you suddenly have a lot more time for homework and studying. She brought her GPA up to a 3.1 by the end of the semester. The private school graduation was conditional on maintaining that C average, and she barely made it, but she made it through her own effort rather than just coasting on my financial support. Walking across that stage in her cap and gown, I could see something different in her posture. There was less entitlement and more awareness of what it had actually taken to get there. She'd earned this graduation in a way she never would have if I just kept enabling her poor choices. Victoria and I were doing better than we had in years. Turns out when you're not constantly fighting about parenting decisions, you remember why you fell in love in the first place and what drew you together originally. We started doing regular date nights again and having actual conversations instead of just coordinating Lily's schedule and discussing her latest crisis. "Do you think she's learned her lesson?" Victoria asked one night over dinner. "She's learning consequences," I said thoughtfully. "But I don't think she really understands what she did yet or why it hurt so much." "Give her time," Victoria said. "She's still a kid." "She's 17 in 3 months, Victoria," I replied. At some point, being a kid isn't an excuse anymore for treating people badly. Lily had been accepted to the state university, which was the only school she could realistically afford now that her college fund was gone. She was planning to live at home and commute to save money, and work part-time to pay for books and other expenses. It was a far cry from her original plans of out-of-state private colleges and sorority life. But she was adapting to reality in a way she never had to before. The apology, when it finally came, wasn't anything like what I expected. It happened on a random Friday night in July, after she'd been working under this new system for several months. Lily had been working a double shift at the clothing store and came home looking absolutely wiped out from the long day. She'd been saving for a used car and had her eye on this 2016 Toyota Corolla for $9,000. She was about $1,400 short of her goal, which must have felt like an enormous amount when you're earning $12 an hour and trying to budget for everything else. I found her in the kitchen around midnight, sitting at the table with a calculator and a pile of crumpled receipts, trying to figure out how to make her budget work to reach her savings goal. "You okay?" I asked, grabbing a glass of water from the sink. She looked up, and for the first time in months, I saw the 7-year-old girl who used to ask me to help with her math homework when problems got too difficult. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked a little, betraying her frustration. "Doesn't look fine," I said, sitting down across from her. "What's going on?" She gestured at the mess of papers spread across the table. "I'm trying to figure out how long it'll take me to save up the rest for the car. At this rate, it'll be like 5 more months." She paused, then added with obvious frustration, "And Jessica's parents just bought her a brand new Jeep for graduation. Like just wrote a check and handed her the keys." There was no entitlement in her voice anymore, no expectation that I should solve this problem for her. Just exhaustion, and maybe a little envy for the life she used to have, when everything was handed to her without effort or appreciation. "5 months isn't that long," I said, trying to be encouraging. "I know, it's just..." She trailed off, then started again with obvious difficulty. "I used to think money just appeared, you know? Like I needed something and it would just happen. I never thought about where it came from or what it cost you." She was staring at the calculator, not looking at me, like she was afraid to make eye contact during this conversation. "I never said thank you for any of it," she continued quietly. "The car, the school, the braces, all of it. I just took it like it was owed to me or something." My throat felt tight. This was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from her in months, and it was more genuine than anything she'd said in years. "And that thing I said about you, not being my dad." She finally looked up, and her eyes were red with unshed tears. "That was really messed up. You've been more of a father to me than my actual father ever was, and I treated you like garbage." The tears started then, but they weren't manipulative teenage dramatics. These were genuine tears of regret from someone who'd finally figured out what she'd lost and how badly she'd hurt someone who loved her. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. And that word, Dad, hit me harder than I expected. "I'm really, really sorry. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any way you could forgive me? And maybe help me figure out how to fix this?" I sat there for a minute, watching this kid I'd raised cry over a pile of receipts and budget calculations. She'd learned the lesson, but more than that, she'd learned why the lesson mattered. She understood now that respect and gratitude aren't automatic. They have to be earned and expressed. "You know what, Lily?" I said finally. "I think we can work something out." The conversation that followed lasted until almost 3 in the morning. We talked about everything: her attitude over the past few years, the way our family had been functioning, and how we wanted things to work going forward. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and it felt like we were finally building something real instead of just going through the motions. "I want to help you with college," I told her. "But things are going to be completely different this time. No more blank checks, no more assumptions about what I'll pay for. You want something, you work for part of it, and we'll talk about what I'm willing to contribute." She nodded eagerly, and I could see that she genuinely wanted to earn things now instead of just having them handed to her. "I get it," she said. "I want to earn things. It feels better when you work for something." We worked out a deal for the car first, since that was her immediate concern. She'd saved $8,100 on her own, which was more money than she'd ever had in her life and represented months of hard work. I agreed to loan her the remaining $900 at 0 interest, with $150 monthly payments until it was paid off. Her car, her responsibility, but with a little help to get there. For college, we came up with a system that would teach her responsibility while still supporting her education. I'd pay for tuition and books, which were the major expenses, but she'd cover her own gas, food, and spending money through work. If she maintained a 3.2 GPA, I'd help with a modest dorm room her sophomore year so she could have the full college experience. If she wanted to study abroad or do expensive internships, she'd need to figure out scholarships or contribute her own savings. "It's like a partnership," she said, and I could see the understanding in her eyes. "Instead of you just paying for everything and me just taking it." "Exactly," I said. "We're both invested in your success now." The apology to Victoria came next, which was harder for Lily because it meant admitting that her behavior had put strain on our marriage. She had to acknowledge how her disrespect toward me had forced Victoria to choose sides and created conflict in our household. That conversation was more difficult for her because it meant admitting she'd been selfish about more than just money. She'd been selfish about our family dynamics too. But the real test of whether she'd actually changed came a few weeks later. Lily's friend Jessica invited her on a family vacation to Hawaii, all expenses paid by Jessica's parents, with Lily just needing spending money for souvenirs and activities. It was exactly the kind of situation where old Lily would have assumed I'd hand over whatever she needed and gotten angry if I said no. New Lily came to me with a completely different approach. "I know this is asking a lot, but I really want to go," she said. "I've been looking at prices for activities and food, and I think I'd need about $500 for the week. I have $250 saved up already. Would you be willing to advance me some money for my car payments if I agree to work extra shifts to pay it back faster?" She'd done the research, figured out a realistic plan, and come to me with a reasonable request instead of a demand. She was asking for help, not expecting it as a given. That's when I knew she'd really changed. I agreed to the advance, and she ended up working 7 days a week for 4 weeks to pay it back early. She came home exhausted every day, but proud of herself for earning the trip instead of just having it handed to her. The work ethic she developed was something no amount of money could have taught her. It's been 9 months since Lily's heartfelt apology in our kitchen, and honestly, our family is stronger than it's ever been. Not because everything went back to the way it was before, because it didn't. We built something entirely new and better from the foundation up. Lily graduated high school with a 3.2 GPA and a work ethic that would have been completely unrecognizable a year ago. She's starting college in the fall, living at home for the first year to save money. But she's genuinely excited about it, instead of resentful about the compromises. She picked a practical major, business with a focus on marketing, because she wants to have a career that can support her independence rather than just choosing something that sounds fun. The car situation worked out perfectly. That Toyota Corolla has been incredibly reliable, and Lily treats it like the valuable possession it is instead of just another thing she's entitled to have. She pays for her own gas and insurance now, budgets carefully for maintenance, and actually reads the manual when something seems off. More importantly, she understands that owning a car is a responsibility, not just a convenience. Our relationship has been completely transformed in ways I never expected. Lily actually asks for my advice now about college classes, job decisions, and even relationship stuff. Not because she has to, but because she genuinely wants my input and values my opinion. She listens when I give advice instead of just tolerating it until she can escape. The respect is real now, earned through experience rather than demanded through authority. Victoria and I are solid again. Better than solid, actually. We're a genuine team now in a way we never were before, even in our early years together. We make decisions together, present a united front on boundaries and expectations, and actually enjoy spending time together as a family instead of just managing crisis after crisis. The respect thing was the biggest change, and it transformed everything else. Lily treats me like a father figure now, not just her mom's husband who pays for things. She says thank you when I help with something. She asks permission before making big decisions, and she actually considers my feelings when she makes choices. It's the difference between compliance and genuine respect. Last month, she got promoted to assistant manager at the clothing store where she's been working. $15 an hour plus a small commission on sales. Not a fortune, but a real step up that she earned through her own merit. She was absolutely glowing with pride when she told us about it over dinner. "You know what the best part is?" she said that night. "When customers ask how I got promoted so fast, I can tell them it's because I work hard and show up on time. Not because my stepdad knows the owner or pulled strings for me. That right there, that's the difference." She understands now that earning something feels infinitely better than having it given to you. That respect is something you build through consistent actions, not something you're automatically owed. That relationships require effort and consideration from both sides. We still have our moments, of course. She's still a teenager, still makes mistakes, and occasionally tests boundaries to see if the old rules might come back. But when she screws up now, she owns it completely. She apologizes when she's wrong, accepts consequences without turning into a victim, and learns from her mistakes instead of just repeating them. The college fund situation evolved in an interesting way. I never rebuilt it the same way I had before, but I've been setting aside money for her education as we go. She knows about it now, knows approximately how much I'm willing to contribute each semester, and she plans accordingly. No more blank checks, but no more uncertainty either. It's a partnership where we both know what to expect. For her 18th birthday last month, I bought her a laptop for college. It wasn't the most expensive model available, but it was a quality machine that would serve her well through her studies. The look on her face when she opened it was pure, genuine gratitude, something I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you so much," she said, and her appreciation was completely authentic. And then she added something that meant everything to me. "I know you didn't have to do this." That last part, that acknowledgement that my generosity was a choice, not an obligation, that's everything. It represents the complete transformation from entitled teenager to grateful young adult who understands that nothing in life is guaranteed. Looking back on this entire situation, I'm almost grateful it happened the way it did. Not for the pain and stress, not for those months of feeling like a stranger in my own home. That part was genuinely awful and something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But for what came after, for the family we managed to build from the ashes of the old one, I'm grateful beyond words. I could have walked away when Lily told me I wasn't her father. I could have filed for divorce, cut them both off completely, and called it a lesson learned about the dangers of blended families. Many men in my situation would have done exactly that, and honestly, I wouldn't have blamed them. But real men don't nuke their families just to prove a point or get revenge. That's not strength. That's cowardice disguised as self-respect. I didn't want Lily to grow up fatherless like she had for the first few years of her life. And I wasn't about to let Victoria fall back into survival mode just because she couldn't see what was happening with her daughter's behavior. So instead, I laid out the rules clearly and gave them both a choice. Either we fix this together as a family, or I'm out completely. There was no middle ground, no compromise position where I'd continue being the ATM while being disrespected. It was all or nothing. They chose correctly. And now we're all living on terms that actually work for everyone involved. Lily learned that actions have consequences, that respect is earned rather than demanded, and that real satisfaction comes from working for what you want. Victoria learned that being a good mother sometimes means setting boundaries instead of making excuses. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save what really matters. The most important lesson in all of this is that love without boundaries isn't actually love. It's enabling. When you give someone everything they want without requiring anything in return, you're not helping them. You're crippling them. You're preventing them from developing the skills they need to function as independent adults. Lily is going to be successful in life now, not because I funded her path to success, but because she learned how to work for what she wants. She developed resilience, work ethic, and appreciation for the things she has. Those are gifts that no amount of money could have bought her. Our family works now because it's built on mutual respect instead of financial obligation. We're all here because we choose to be, not because anyone feels trapped by circumstances or dependency. That makes every moment together more meaningful and every relationship more genuine. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their worst behaviors and force them to become their best selves. It's painful in the short term, but it's the only way real growth happens. And in the end, everyone is stronger for it.